MP or ADUN defect, it automatically vacate the seat for a by-election by law. But we see that that can lead about to several unintended consequences. One is that it would neutralize the voice of MP who wants to speak from their own conscience or to vote freely based on conscience, and gives a undue hold over by the party leadership over elected MPs. That is one. Second thing is that I think it also has the consequence of not allowing MPs who wants to quit because of grand corruption, perhaps by their party leader, and also because of unkept promises by their party, and they want to align themselves basically with other parties. So not all frogs are bad. That's what we are saying. So we want a solution that basically gives some room and flexibility for all this, but also, more importantly, recall election empowers voters themselves. Now, we may not realize it, but in all circumstances, whether it's
recording in progress,
whether it is an employment contract, whether it is buying a car, when something is wrong, you have the right to recall, you know. But when it comes to election, voters don't have that right, and they can only watch helplessly, like what we are doing right now when their MPs defect to another party. So recall election mechanism allow voter to change their representative midterm. So we basically doing this simulated recall election to engage with the Malaysian public, to bring about public awareness so that they can support this reform. Because we have engaged quite a lot with politicians and other stakeholders over the past 1 year through webinars, issuing a statement, and also doing our report. But now we want to go to you, the public, basically to get your support, so that what we hope for is that you will then put pressure on the politicians and political party to make a commitment to make this into part of Malaysian law. I think this. Now, the impetus for us to do this mock recall after more than a year of the Sheraton move was actually during the second wave of defection. It was a small wave, but it was on the first anniversary of the Sheraton move when we saw the MP for Tebrau, Julau, and then soon after that, Kuala Langkat defecting to align themselves with the present government. Now, we saw the frustration of voters on the ground, the anger, but yet there was nothing much they can do other than on social media posting angry comments. So we decided that there is a need for a platform whereby people can express their views in a more constructive and calculated way that will send a clear message to those who have defected. So we then started the process, and it took a bit of time since March, simply because our brief to our technology partner, Rigolf, was that we need a system that is robust, secure, and easy enough to use and trustworthy, as that is good enough even to conduct a real election. So with that brief, they took the necessary time to develop. What we have right now is a very strong e-voting system. So I believe that this is going to be the first time that Malaysia will have a chance to use an e-voting system. Later on, our technology partner, Rigolf, will be demonstrating this system, and you can have a look at it, at the security features that we have built into this system. So this is the first time for Malaysia, a mock recall election, and also an e-voting system. Now, to participate in this mock recall, you need to be a registered voter at the last general election, GE14, to vote in that constituency. Maybe I'll just right now share screen so that I can just quickly graphically show to you what we mean, the process. Okay. Okay, so if you are interested to participate in this recall election, you first need to apply to BERSIH 2.0, and we have given an email that you can email to in our press statement is recall@bersih.org. Now, we decided to limit the applicants to only registered NGO or organization and political parties in the target constituency. So not just any individual can apply, because what we do not want is basically to start many campaigns whereby the likelihood of someone going through the whole process is very slim, because they do not have the organizational support or backup. So we will review the application to us and limit it only to registered organization or political parties in the targeted constituency. Then we will create a link, a special online link, where you need to collect at least 3% of registered voter in that constituency. Now, once that is received, BERSIH will check through and make sure that these are genuine, bona fide voters. Then we will open up, because acting as the electoral committee, we want to be fair to all parties, including the targeted member of parliament or ADUN who has defected. And we will give an opportunity to them to defend themselves in a forum, why their defection is justified and they should be kept, they should not be sacked. And then we also give the petitioner the opportunity to also state why this MP should be sacked from that constituency. Now, if the MP doesn't take it up, then we will not hold the forum. Then we will move on to the next stage, which is to conduct the recall vote. Another link will be created whereby voters in that constituency will have 1 month to vote yes or no. Do you want to sack YB so and so? Yes to sack, no to keep. Cast their vote, and that vote will be kept for 1 month. Even us will not know the progress of the vote. At the end of the 1 month, we will then open up the result and announce. Now, to be considered as a successful recall, we need to have more yes vote than no vote, and also a minimum of 10% of registered voter in that constituency to participate. Right. So this is to give some indication and credibility to the whole process. So a minimum of 10% taking part, then BERSIH will, let's say, it achieve that more yes vote and more than 10%, then we will say, if there is a recall for this constituency, there is more than a likelihood that this candidate will be sacked. So that will be the end of that campaign for that constituency. So we encourage constituency that has saw defections over the past over years, since, in fact, the time frame will be since the last general election, because don't forget, Sheraton move was not the first time we saw mass defection. GE14, after GE14, we also saw a wave of defection to align with Pakatan Harapan at that time. So this also qualified, so if you are a voter or political party or organization in those constituency, you are most welcome to contact us. So this is basically the whole process. And to run this campaign, we obviously have invested much to develop this system. Our partners, Regov, has allocated a lot of resources, including financial resources, to develop this system that you'll be looking at afterwards. Also, it will cost us much to maintain it. It is estimated that each recall campaign in each constituency would cost about 35,000 ringgit. So let me just give you that breakdown again. Right. The cost of running the Sack or Keep campaign. Each recall campaign in each constituency, the hosting of it, sending out the one-time password SMS, because some constituency are 100 over 1,000 voters. Of course, we don't think we'll have a high turnout, given that this is just a mock recall and not compelled by government, and also that this is during a time of pandemic. But still, there will be costs involved in the SMS, and also to secure the system. It will cost about 35,000 each constituency. So we target at least about 10, so that's 350,000. Then the staffing and publicity for the first year, we tend to run this campaign for 2 years until GE15, assuming that GE15 will go full term. The 14th Parliament now will go full term, so it will take 2 years. We'll run it till then, about 75,000 per year. So that comes to about 500,000. So this is the target that we want to raise from the public to run this campaign. So if you want to donate to this campaign, to the Sack or Keep campaign, you can bank directly to our bank account. I'm showing the screen right now. Or you can send through your bank mobile app to BERSIH and direct into our account. This is our QR code over there. I'll do it now, QR code, right? So this information will be available in the press statement and also the media as well. So that is the situation, and with that, I want to hand the time back to Debbie. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas Fan, Chairperson of BERSIH 2.0. Now, we would like to share a 3-minute video on recall elections in the context of Malaysia, the simulated recall elections process as proposed by BERSIH 2.0, and what it means for voters in Malaysia.
General elections in Malaysia are a time of hope for Malaysians. In a democracy, each and every Malaysian has a voice in deciding the direction of Malaysia. Through the power of the people, representatives are elected for each constituency. But what happens when elected members of parliament defect to other parties? Or when a party defects from a coalition? Party hopping robs voters of their voice and choice, resulting in voters becoming disillusioned. Since general elections take place every 5 years, do constituents have to wait for the next general election to exercise their votes? One way to give voters the power of decision when their representatives defect to other parties or coalitions is through the recall election. The recall election is an electoral mechanism that allows voters to petition for a midterm election to try and remove the elected representative of their constituency who 1. defect post-election, 2. are convicted for a non-compoundable offence, 3. are absent from more than 80% of legislative seatings within 6 months. BERSIH 2.0's simulated recall elections campaign gave voters of a constituency whose elected representative has defected the opportunity to try out how a recall election might work in Malaysia if we have such a law. It is a non-partisan campaign demonstrating that voters can be empowered in between general elections and hopefully encourages voters to push for a recall election law. This is an example of a simulated recall election. Constituency A's elected representative has defected from Party X to Party Y. If the constituents disagree with the change from Party X to Party Y, they need to contact BERSIH 2.0 and start collecting the signatures of 3% of registered voters within the constituency through an online petition to show an interest in sacking their representative. Once BERSIH 2.0, who acts as the electoral committee in this simulation, verified that the 3% of votes are by registered voters, BERSIH 2.0 will start the simulation recall election where at least 10% of registered voters within the constituency has to participate. Voters are able to participate safely from home in this pandemic. Through a safe, user-friendly and robust system, voters can both petition and cast their votes on this secure platform. Voters are able to trust the e-voting system as much as they trust their e-banking system because the e-voting system has security measures in place to ensure through technology that each vote is securely cast by a legitimate voter. Voters will be asked whether they want to sack or keep their elected representative. For an elected representative to be considered sacked in this simulation, there must be more yes voters than no voters, meaning more sack votes than keep votes, and at least 10% of registered voters have participated. The objective of this simulated recall election is to show that voters want to practice their voting rights and make their voices heard in deciding who represents them even between general elections. Recall elections can deter party hopping and encourage voters to go out and vote during general elections because they believe their voices truly count.
This simulated recall elections campaign also showcases a secure and user-friendly e-voting system by BERSIH 2.0's tech partner Regov. I would like to invite Regov spokesperson Julian Xiao to present a demonstration of the e-voting system that will be used in this simulated campaign. Julian?
Hi. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Julian Xiao. I'm the project manager for this platform. My company is Regov Technologies. We are a financial technology company that specializes in artificial intelligence and blockchain-based technology. With me today is Simon Ulrich, our CEO cum CTO, who will be assisting me in the event that you have any technical questions. But without further ado, allow me to share my screen and get started on the demo. Okay, so first things first, this is the platform. It's the current website that we'll be using to conduct this recall election, simulated recall election, sorry. This is the general landing page. Now, as you can see, there's an ongoing campaigns button. So right now there's only one for P158 Tabral. In the future, if you have multiple campaigns, there'll be multiple tabs here. But in any case, for now, we'll use this P158 Tabral and access the campaign. Let me just close this. Okay, so now we're in the campaign page, and everything for this campaign is listed on this website. As you can see, there's a vote on this petition button. Actually, let me do it in Malay. Yeah, so you can see there's a vote on this petition button here, which I will click to register. We're now in the registration phase for the platform. It's going to ask you for three things. First things first, it's going to ask you for three things. It's going to ask you for your NRIC, your mobile number, and your email address. Like Thomas mentioned earlier, only people who are registered in the constituency and are included in the electoral roll are allowed to participate. This means if somebody is from somewhere outside of Tabral and you attempt to register, it's not going to let you. So to demonstrate this, allow me to type in a number that I know for a fact is not in the electoral roll. I'm going to put in my phone number and a email address. So as you can see here, this NRIC, it's just not in the electoral roll, and I know this for a fact. So if we attempt to go past, it's going to give you an error message. Anda tidak layak mengundi di kawasan ini. In English, you are not eligible to participate in this constituency. So it's a very clear indication, and it very clearly stops people who are not eligible from participating or influencing the vote right at the beginning. It's fairly straightforward. In addition to this, we also have a checkbox here where people can decide whether or not they want to opt in to notification preferences, but yeah, that's completely optional. Allow me to change it to a number that is part of the constituency and attempt to go next. So that number right there was actually my NRIC number. For the purpose of the demonstration, we had added it to the database because it's necessary in order to do the second stage. As you can see, we're now in pengesahan, validation. And in validation, this is where the real robustness of the system comes into place. As you can see, there's two things here. There's identity verification or facial recognition. The second thing is OTP. So in identity verification, it's going to ask you for two things. I need a picture of your NRIC, and I need a picture of your selfie. So here's my NRIC with the picture, and here is my selfie, okay? When I put this in, I also obviously received a text message on my phone with the OTP. I'll key that in right now. So let me go through. Now, what happens if I use, let's say, my colleague's NRIC? Okay, so that's not me, obviously, that's a girl. And that's a girl's NRIC number included, but I attempt to use my facial recognition. I attempt to go past. This is the part where basically it instantly checks you. Input tidak sah. The input is not valid. Similarly, if I were to attempt with both her NRIC and her selfie, it's still not going to let me. The reason for this is simple. In addition to doing the facial recognition to ensuring that the face, the selfie, is matching the NRIC, there's also a second level of verification whereby it's checking that my number listed here on the NRIC is exactly the same as the number I listed back in the pendaftaran phase. So in this way, it's not like people who can randomly register with NRICs listed in the electoral roll can come here and try to use whatever NRIC photo they have. No, they have to use the exact NRIC that they had attempted to register with. So now I've put in my real one, Julian NRIC, Julian selfie. We're gonna go next. Okay, so now you can see it let me through. No more input tidak sah. Finally, we're at tanda. For the 3% phase, if you remember Thomas mentioned earlier, the 3% we need to garner signatures. So basically all this is a summary page, basically breaking down what this petition is for, as well as a checkbox for you to sign. Okay, let me just quickly show what it looks like in English. Okay, checkbox for you to sign, summary text, and finally, votes on this petition. Okay, and just like that, you're done. Simple and straightforward. I need you to put your NRIC, your email address, and your phone number in the first page. In the second page, I need your NRIC image and I need your NRIC selfie, and obviously type in the OTP on your phone. And the third stage, just click sign. Simple and straightforward. And that's basically it. You can see this went up from 1 to 2. And this is actually a dynamic tracker to show you how many people have participated so far, for you to calculate how close you are to the goal. So some of you might be thinking like, perhaps this was too simple. Where's this security that Thomas was talking about earlier? Or some of you might be thinking, this might be too complicated. Some people might not be able to access it. For that, we actually prepared a presentation to explain why BERSIH and reGov has decided on this specific set of verification measures. So when it comes to these e-voting platforms or these online registrations, it's basically a trade-off. On one side, we have accessibility. On the other side, we have security. And the more accessible you want something, the less secure it can be. Similarly, on the other end, if the more secure you want it, the less accessible it will be. This is the general rule of thumb. So now it becomes a balancing act between the two. On one hand, if we look at option 1 on the left side of the screen, you'll see simple sign up, no verification, essentially non-existent security. And these all platforms most of us are familiar with. Change.org, all of us are familiar with. What do you need? You need a name, an email address, and you're done. Your vote counts. Petitions by the UK government and parliament. This is actually interesting. What they needed for anything at all to be debated in parliament is 100,000 signatures on this website. Now, how would you register on this website? You would put in your name, you put in your zip code, and put in the current country that you're residing in. That's it. And this is the official UK government petition website. They actually used this to attempt to revoke Article 50 back in 2016, and that garnered 6 million votes. So it is officially used. Finally, you see here, even the European Parliament uses something similar. European Parliament it makes you register, but it makes you register by typing name, username, password, email address, whatnot. And frankly, if you want, you can go there and try it yourself right now. There's absolutely zero verification, zero validation. So now, on the other hand, all the way on the other end of the spectrum, we have option number 3. Extremely secure, tedious registration process, significantly reduced participation. This is the key word. What do I mean by this? What are the options here in the first place? Well, if you look at this image here, you'll notice that's an e-ballot machine. Normally it's placed in voting centers, so you don't have to walk to a booth and manually fill out a card. You can see here, this is an image from the American election, the recent one. That's an e-polling booth. Some of you might be familiar with it, but there are significant problems when it comes to this. Number one, extremely costly if you want to do, extremely costly. First, you've got to get the infrastructure, you've got to plan the event, you've got to make sure everyone turns out on the same day, you've got to hire staff, yada, yada, yada. In addition to that, obviously, with the current COVID situation, it's impossible to have anyone come out for something like this. Perhaps only for vaccinations, but nothing else. No other mass gatherings are allowed. So option 3 is off the tables as well. This brings us to the middle of the road solution, option 2, which is what BERSIH has decided on alongside reGov. So what we propose and what we are offering are verifiable registrations. As you can see, it was quite a complete system, and it does verify to a certain extent, to a good extent, that everyone who participates in the petition are indeed legitimate members of the constituency. Number 2, there's no real efficient way to manipulate the votes. Okay, so technically, because there's no human review, there are certain ways, very specific ways to influence the vote. But these are extremely limited. They're not efficient at all. Even if somebody wanted to do it, it'd be ridiculously inefficient for them to try to do so. And honestly, their influence would be negligible. And finally, this brings us to the final point, balance between security versus accessibility. If Thomas mentioned earlier, and Debbie mentioned as well, certain online banks, if you remember your e-wallets, when you register in the first place for your e-wallet itself, they need to do a facial recognition, and you type in your NRIC. So reGov is actually familiar with these eKYC. We create these systems for banks, like major banks and investment banks. So we understand that this is the current standard in the financial industry. And frankly, if it's good enough for the financial industry, I think it's good enough and accessible enough for our purposes, this e-voting solution. So to summarize, in case anyone is still confused as to what the verification procedures are, First, on the first page, we do an electoral roll check. We check your NRIC against the electoral roll. Are you indeed eligible to participate in the first place? Second thing, we do facial recognition. We check your NRIC image versus your selfie image. Did you just randomly manage to pull out a picture of this NRIC? Perhaps from some company database results? Or, you know, are you indeed the person you say you are? Finally, you have thirdly, you have NRIC number verification. We check the card number on your NRIC and make sure that it's exactly the same as the number you had keyed in the electoral roll. This way, we prevent people from exploiting their access to electoral rolls, as certain individuals and certain institutions have the entire electoral rolls. And finally, we have OTP. OTPs are limited to 3 registrations per mobile phone. So, for example, even if you did try to influence it, you would need many phone numbers to have any significant impact. Now, in addition to these 4 verification procedures, obviously, we have lots of infrastructure in the back end preventing attacks on malicious activity. In addition to that, we also have background analytics running on every single user that will basically end up providing BERSIH with information as to how clean and fair the process was. They won't actively kick people out, or they might actively kick people out if you fail any of these steps, but there are certain other steps which I will not divulge that will basically flag the users to BERSIH and let them know that suspicious activity is occurring. Yeah, but this is basically the summary of our registration process and the platform. Yeah, I believe that is it from our side. Back to you, Debbie.
Thank you, Julian Sale from BERSIH 2.0's tech partner, Regov. There will be a question and answer session at the tail end of this event, and you are invited to stay on to ask questions on the technical aspects as well as the political aspects of this campaign. Now, it is with great pleasure that we invite former Dewan Rakyat Speaker Tan Sri Arif Yusuf to officiate this campaign. Tan Sri Arif Yusuf.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera. Good morning, all. First of all, I wish to thank the organizers, BERSIH and Thomas Fan, for inviting me to officiate this virtual event, especially when we are still in a national lockdown. Since the recent general and state elections, Malaysia has seen a number of changes in government where voters are left out of the decision-making process. Despite being a democracy, the majority vote of the people has not been taken into account in some very alarming circumstances lately, leading to situations, infamous situations, such as the backdoor government, party hopping leading to changes of government at state level, various state levels, and so on. It is therefore inevitable that voters feel somewhat disillusioned when their votes are disrespected. What is the point of standing in line to vote when elected representatives abandon the mandate voters have entrusted them? As a result, we may find that fewer Malaysians may go out to vote, and the sentiment of disappointment and distrust grows over time. As a nation, we need to return the dignity of voters and the power of the vote to the general electorate. It is the vote of the people that should determine how this nation is steered forward. Representatives should not be allowed to decide for the people or take any action that betrays the trust placed in them by the people. Elections must be voter-centric and not political party-centric. The electoral system should always serve the people of Malaysia. It is not a system that is set up for the advancement of any one political party or coalition. Unfortunately, under our present law, party hopping is allowed by the federal and state constitutions. Article 10, Clause 1, Paragraph C, and the equivalent provisions in the state constitutions have been read by our courts under the rubric of the right to freedom of association as disallowing any law to prohibit party hopping. Such a law is deemed to be unconstitutional, unfortunately. Most will remember the case of Dewan Undangan Negeri Kelantan and another versus Nordin bin Saleh and another, decided in 1992. It's been some time since then. Seeing how party hopping can adversely affect the democratic process, this decision hopefully will be revisited at some time in the future. And any law outlawing party hopping will be regarded as reasonable and necessary to protect the concept of morality as mentioned in the same Article 10. Morality in this connection should surely embrace political morality. It cannot be read in such a limited fashion as to cover things like obscene publications or obscene association and so forth. Maybe it should embrace, as I was saying just now, political morality. Maybe the exceptions to the general principle can be further expanded to include empowering Parliament and the state legislative assemblies to pass laws to impose reasonable restrictions not only on the privileges of the legislatures, but also further to impose restrictions to protect the democratic process or the integrity of the electoral process. This will meet constitutional amendment, so we know how difficult it can be. Until such time, there is a need to search for other ways to strengthen and protect the democratic process as represented by the people's choice through the ballot box. Recall elections is one way to maintain the voice and vote of the people as Malaysia moves forward. For one, it deters party hopping. Representatives will have to think twice before moving from one party to another after elections. In a way, it will be a win-win situation where representatives are held accountable to the constituents they serve and where constituents hold the power to sack or keep the representatives. Through recall elections, Malaysians no longer will have to wait for the next general election to take action on representatives who party hop or fail to serve their constituency. Constituents can practice their rights by choosing to sack or keep their representatives through recall elections. Recall elections can empower the people of Malaysia. It will be a way of continuing to respect the voice of the people outside of general elections and state elections and keep representatives accountable. A simulation such as this, sack or keep campaign, is a meaningful way of introducing what recall elections would be like. It serves to show constituents how the process could potentially take place. It also gives voters a taste of what an e-voting system would be like. At the same time, representatives and parties become aware that Malaysians want to have their voice heard outside of general elections. Accountability is key in developing a leadership and government that is transparent, people-centered, and truly chosen by the people. I am therefore very glad to see BERSIH initiating this event. It will open minds and provide an insight into how available technology can be integrated into the democratic process. At a time when we are discussing the viability of virtual or hybrid legislative proceedings and electronic voting, this event couldn't have come at a better time. Personally, I am looking forward to following the simulation exercise, and we have had a taste just now of what it will look like. So with that, wishing sincere congratulations to BERSIH and the organizers. As officiant on this virtual platform, I am therefore very pleased to hereby officiate the launch of Sack or Keep, a simulated recall election campaign by BERSIH 2.0. Thank you, and my very best wishes to all.
Thank you, Tan Sri Arif Yusof. If we were all in the same room and if we weren't in the midst of a pandemic, we will all be shaking hands and taking selfies over coffee and kueh at an event like this. But since you're all here virtually, I suppose we need to make do with a photo session instead. So may I invite everyone to please turn on your camera for a photo session? Thank you.
Okay, everyone, please switch on your cameras. Okay, I'll start now then. Please keep yourself on mute and smile. 1, 2, 3. One more page to go. And 1, 2, 3. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lavanya. So in this session, Sepatah Dua Kata dari Ahli-Ahli Politik.NGO, we will be inviting political representatives and representatives from NGOs to share a few words about what they think about recall elections. To start off with, I would like to invite YB Ong Kian Ming from the Democratic Action Party, DAP. YB Ong Kian Ming.
Thanks, Debbie. Thanks, BERSIH, for organizing this. I'd like to congratulate all the hard work that you guys have put in. I know that especially Dr. Wong Chin Huat has put in a lot of thought and energy into thinking of different ways in which we can increase democratic accountability to the rakyat, especially in view of what happened, as rightly said by Thomas, after 2018 general elections. With the shifting of MPs from UMNO to Bersatu, and then subsequently Sheraton Move and beyond. I would like to just raise up a couple of points that maybe we can discuss later on. Firstly, I think it's important to have thresholds for these recall elections, and I'm wondering whether 3% or 5%, whatever the number may be, whether there was any scientific or rationale behind having that kind of threshold. Of course, when you have a higher threshold, it means there's less high hurdles which has to be crossed. But at the same time, if you have too low a threshold, you are subject to certain vagaries. For example, if let's say the member of parliament or the has offended minority, some groups which are very powerful from a commercial perspective in their own respective constituencies. These powerful, commercial interests can you make use of their resources to get enough signatures to have a recall election. So that's something to consider. Another thing that perhaps could be considered is the advantages of having such a recall election in view of the constitutional constitutional provision to allow freedom of association. So I think this is one good way in which we can go away from that, or rather to perhaps not get too tied down by this constitutional provision, which may have been the case if, let's say, there was a requirement that said whoever wants to change parties needs to resign as an MP. So I think that this can be something good as well. And the last point, I hope that we can get cross bipartisan support for such an initiative, because I'm very sure that UMNO leaders also were not happy with the fact that many of their leaders and MPs crossed over to Bersatu. So this should not be seen as something that is being supported only by Pakatan Harapan or opposition parties, but that this should be supported by all parties across the political spectrum. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, YB Ong Kian Ming. I would like to now call upon YB Wilfred Medias Tangau from the United Progressive Kinabalu organization. YB Medias.
Debbie, I think he's still not here yet. Can go to the others first.
All right. Can we have YB Wong Chen from People's Justice Party, PKR?
Okay, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? You can, right? Okay. Well, you know, as Tan Sri Arif said, since G14, Malaysia has become a very different country in terms of politics. There is no one dominant party anymore. Everything is now coalition politics. And everybody also had a taste of power. And in the case of Barisan National parties, they had a taste of not being in power. So political motivations today are really about gaining power, not so much more on reform. And you know, the fundamental reforms that didn't come in the 22 months after G14 also drive this idea that Malaysians are losing hope that any real reforms will ever happen in this country. But having said that, there are still a lot of good MPs from both sides, you know, not just on our side, the other side too. But we're also witnessing a certain breed of politician coming up, power hungry, fully compromised, no track record or intention to reform, ready to switch camps and for positions, you know. So what I'm saying is this, these people have tasted power, right? So the NGOs and the reform-minded academics out there have to push much harder for politicians to openly commit to these fundamental reforms. In fact, the agenda for reform to me is now more urgent than pre-2018. So recall election is important too. We've discussed this a lot. So kudos to BERSIH for the launch of this initiative. I just hope that the SBR senior officials are watching this and hope to learn something from it. I understand that BERSIH and Chin Huat have been pushing this for months. You know, it's great to note that you've moved on to the phase of deployment after, you know, lots of discussion with us. There's a lot to learn from simulations, and only by doing can you really identify tweaks and improvements that we need to do. Chin Huat and I mostly agree on most things. We're not just because we are Wongs. But for actual implementation, as Kian Ming pointed out, I think the trigger for the petition should be a bit higher. I've said 30% before to Chin Huat on the threshold for the trigger, which I think is actually quite a high trigger. But again, unless you do the simulation, we wouldn't know. But using a 3% simulation is good. Electronic voting and using blockchain technology is something that PKR, we ourselves are exploring for our own internal party election because we have one person, one vote system. The tech and solution is definitely there, it's definitely secure. But we need, of course, SPR and the current government to buy in. And like Kian Ming, I also hope that all the political parties get together because, you know, party hopping is a double-edged sword. It cuts both ways. The coalition that receives any frogs will only enjoy a temporary political boost before a better offer comes along and does the same thing to those frogs or even other frogs. So the only winners in all this is really the frogs who like to call themselves kingmakers. Yeah. So what we need is a bipartisan awakening of all these political parties to come together and pass laws on recall election and hopefully other anti-hopping measures. So congrats to BERSIH. Thank you. That's just my 2 cents on the matter. Thank you.
Thank you, YB Wong Chen. Can we have now YB Fahmi Fadzil from the People's Justice Party, PKR?
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm very much in favor of recall election. Actually, if you just look at the statistics, I'd say like 90-95% of all of those who've jumped have jumped from either UMNO or PKR into Bersatu. So I think UMNO and PKR would probably be the ones who are most in favor. And I think people like Bersatu, Tun Mahathir before this, would not be in favor. Of course, they may take the line that Tan Sri Arif mentioned about court ruling, but I think I agree with Tan Sri Arif that the definition or the understanding of what that morality implies has to be widened in scope, given particularly recent developments. In fact, for me, what's most exciting is how is it that we can deploy this kind of technology for members of parliament, not only for purposes of recall, but actually to help members of parliament to engage more consistently, constructively with their electorate on things related to current happenings in parliament. You know, a lot of times you expect members of parliament to represent the constituency, but for us, oftentimes it's hard to really get a sense, how is it that a broad section of our constituency, are they agreeable with this law? You know, how should we vote? I'm thinking whether it's possible to even deploy this to get a sense, if parties were to lift the whip and MPs were to cast their vote according to what the constituency wants. I'm thinking whether it can be employed for that. So there's a lot of application for this. I'm very interested in something, this kind of technology. I think it should be almost standard operating procedure, you know, for MPs today. But I suspect in order for us to implement this systematically and comprehensively, there has to be a fundamental shift in thinking in Putrajaya, because right now power is too much concentrated there, and I don't see how Tan Sri Mahyadin would want anything like this to happen. So I think I agree with Pong Chen. There has to be a broader, almost society-wide push for it, and a campaign for it, right? And I would shift. I would consider adjusting the word ditarik balik. You know, that means it has a different implication. I think you have to find the right Malay word for it and go to town with that. And then I think if you can catch the, you know, fire up the imagination of a broad Malay electorate, right? Hentikan pengkhianatan dan penderhakaan terhadap mandat rakyat, right? I think if it were to be couched in those terms, probably I think you might see some interesting response. Thank you.
Thank you, YB Fahmi Fadzil from PTR. And now we'd like to have YB Wilfred Madius Tangau from the United Progressive Kinabalu organization. YB Madius.
Hi, Debbie. First of all, I'm sorry for the some miscommunication earlier. I was not able to come in. So thanks that now I'm in. Yeah. Yes, I think for this country to progress, we need stability. And stability can only be achieved if there is no hopping, party hopping. Yeah. And we have been talking about this for quite some time. There are various options and things like that. Personally, I'll go for this particular option because I think this is something global. I mean, it's very interesting that you can have technology that you can actually have this e-voting and things like that. It's very interesting. The question, of course, is right now, this proposal that you have is, of course, BERSIH is going to do it and things like that. And eventually, this has to be done by the EC, right? So the thing is, how do we get the EC to buy into this? You know, how do we get the EC to agree with us? Okay, so this has this campaign to go into this option must be something that we have to all, but we have to do. We have to I think more campaigning has to be done and things like that. Yeah. And for us in Sabah, particularly, we have gone through this. I think in Sabah, we have experienced this, and we have seen the brunt of party hopping much more than any part of the country. You know, government has been toppled and things like that because of party hopping and things like that. And the State Assembly of Sabah have actually legislated anti-hop law, which eventually has been declared as ultra-virus federal constitution and things like that. And therefore, I think we had seen it. We have seen it being implemented in legally. You know, a legislative process has been done in Sabah, but it didn't work. You know, it has been challenged and things like that. So I think this is one option. And personally, I will support this. I'm supporting this, and I want to propagate this. You know, and to propagate this, and especially for us in the rural areas who are mostly affected. You know, but the question, of course, for us in Sabah is again connectivity. Okay, government will have to do the necessary thing to make sure that they are all connected. Because if you have to vote electronically, then the first thing is connectivity. There's no connectivity, there's none. Then you can't vote. So you might not be able to get your 10%. No, you need a 10% to recall, and things that you might not be able to get it. So again, the other part of the campaign to make sure this can be done, and especially for us Sabah and Sarawak, you need to really do a lot of this what we call telecommunication tower. We need this connectivity. No connectivity, can't. I mean, you won't believe it. Even those in the suburb in Sabah, you know, you don't have connectivity, you know, you will have problem. You know? So this has to be resolved. This has to be resolved in order for this to work. But however, from the political stability standpoint, from the democracy standpoint, this is the way to go for Malaysia, and I think we must support this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, YB Media. Now, can we have S. Arul Chalwan from Parti Socialist Malaysia, PSM? Arul?
Thank you, Debbie, and thank you, BERSIH. I think, you know, we used to say that people are the bosses, you know. People realize that they are boss for one day, you know. Then the following 4 years and 5 years, the boss is actually money politics. Boss is actually political power, you know. So I think so this whole question about recall election is where the Raya basically gets back the power, which they lose on election day, you know. Because only on election day they have the power. Then after that, you know, it becomes today very cynical, you know. Those days we used to say East Malaysia, like especially the previous Malaysians talk about Sabah. He said this is a East Malaysian issue. Today we know it is a national issue. You know, party hopping is a national issue. So I think I really welcome this recall election. Even in PSM, in party level, we have this recall election. Members who don't perform in the party can be recalled back. So even though this system is not going to be perfect, it's only 10%, you know, this whole thing's about 3 to 10%. I think the idea itself is important. You know, this idea that politician can be recalled, the fear of their name appearing itself is quite an achievement, I think. So I would welcome this because there's no election system which is you know fully free from insecurity or, you know, manipulation. But whatever is it, I think this whole idea, I think, should be more Raya-centered. Raya have the right to recall their leaders. I think that's the idea behind this whole thing, you know. And I think it's a good thing. And if this is achievable, then I think every other election, including kampung election, village election, you know, residence committee election, everywhere there's a right for people to recall. Then the Raya actually regains back their power. So well done, and let's try to make this happen. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Arul. Can we now have Datuk Husamuddin Yaakob from Sinar Harian? Datuk Husamuddin Yaakob.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera. First, saya nak ucapkan tahniah dan syabas kepada BERSIH dan RIGAF kerana melahirkan satu sistem yang amat bagus. Bagi saya, ini harus disokong oleh semua pihak kerana ini akan dapat memberi satu fear factor baru kepada kebanyakan politician, bukan semua, yang tidak takut pada Tuhan. Jadi sekurang-kurangnya dia ada takut dengan recall ini. Cuma bila saya perhatikan apa-apa saja kalau mau berjaya di Malaysia ni mesti ada buy-in daripada majoriti Melayu. So kita harus bergerak ke depan ini untuk bagaimana untuk meyakinkan pengundi-pengundi Melayu ini penting untuk mereka. Jadi itu yang saya rasakan pasal sekarang saya tengok kebanyakan program reformasi ini selalunya dilihat sebagai very elitis. Jadi bagaimana BERSIH dan tim boleh pindahkan ataupun boleh turunkan imej elitis itu kepada kerana rata-rata orang Melayu pun mahu pada perubahan. Rata-rata orang Melayu pun bosan dengan keadaan yang sick and tired lah dengan keadaan sekarang. Cuma mereka mau jalan yang lebih baik daripada sekarang. So bagaimana messaging kita itu aja. Saya setuju dengan YB Fahmi tadi. Effort tu untuk meyakinkan ahli UMNO dan juga pemimpin-pemimpin Melayu untuk menerima kaedah ini. Other than that, saya ucapkan syabas. Thank you.
Okay, terima kasih Datuk Husamuddin. Can we now have Faisal Aziz from Angkatan Belia Islam Malaysia, ABIM?
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you Tan Sri Arif, Thomas Fan, DP, Datuk Usam and all friends. First of all, I would like to congratulate BERSIH for having this simulation. It is a significant example to show to the people how it works, rather than waiting for the government to implement the system. So it resembles the true connotation of democracy, empowering mechanism from the people to empower the people and for the people. So I think I like this kind of empowering system that comes from the people itself, from the NGO. And as what we have said, the Sheraton move, people feel very upset because of Sheraton move, because people was not consulted at all to give the way out of the political turmoil that was in 2019. So at least having this simulation, it can be an alternative. Of course, it is not a perfect system. There is no perfect system in the world, but at least it is, or it serves as mechanism. For the people who always being victimized when it comes to any political turmoil in Malaysia. Saya ucapkan terima kasih kepada BERSIH. Ini adalah inisiatif yang baik. Kita tak perlu tunggu kerajaan untuk buat perkara ini. Jadi inilah konotasi demokrasi yang sebenar. Mekanisme untuk memberi pemberdayaan kepada rakyat yang datangnya daripada rakyat sendiri dan untuk rakyat. Jadi tahniah kepada BERSIH. Itu saja. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Faisal Aziz dari Angkatan Belia Islam Malaysia. And our final speaker for today will be Tarma Pillai from Undi 18.
Hi everyone, thank you very much to BERSIH for organizing and working so hard on this. For me, I think, I believe that the faith in our parliamentary democracy system has been shaken. And when we speak to many of the public and when we listen to them, there is a sense of disappointment, a sense of apathy, and a feeling like it does not matter anymore, right? Why vote if, let's say, you can just go and your leaders can just go and party hop after they've been elected, and they can earn millions just by party hopping, right? So essentially, as rightly mentioned previously, it is not our votes that fundamentally matter in shaping a government or shaping the agenda for rule. It is instead money politics, right? So I think it's important to revive the faith in electoralism and parliamentary democracy, and recall elections is an important element towards getting Malaysians to believe again, because you're giving power and authority back to the rakyat. So for me, first thing is that I think there's two things that need to be done to educate the public, and this is something that the NGOs can do, and also political parties who are supportive. I think this is something that we can do. The first thing is to educate and bring forward to the rakyat, why are we doing recall elections and not anti-hopping laws, right? Because this, I think, this is currently the most popular suggestion amongst members of the public, where many of them are saying that, if you leave your party, you automatically lose your position, right? It's a very simple idea. But I think, as rightly mentioned by previous speakers, this might not be constitutional, or this might be against the principle of your right to association. It also creates other sort of more practical, technical solutions, right? And I think the second is, of course, to educate the public about the mechanisms of the recall election itself and why this will solve the problem of party hopping, or at least reduce it significantly. So for me, I think the terminology of Pilihan, Raya, Pecat is something that is superb, and it evokes the imagery of you firing your MP. And we keep talking about rakyat adalah boss, and as Saudara Arul rightly mentioned, we are only boss for a very short time just a few hours on election day where all the politicians are pandering to us, and then we are no longer the boss anymore, right? But I think the idea of Pilihan Raya Pecat extends that idea, and it means that, you know, just like we are the boss, we can tell you, we can remove an MP if we feel that you're not doing a good enough job, or you betrayed the mandate that we've given to you, right? I think that that idea or that imagery is something that we might be able to play with. Also, in regards of the mechanism for implementation, I would suggest that that the recall election applies for all MPs, right, regardless of whether they have left the parties or not. This is my personal perspective, because as we've seen during Sheraton, and also in other cases, we've seen that entire political parties have, you know, left, and they sort of betrayed the coalition that or the platform that they were elected on. So if we were to only trigger recall elections based on whoever who has jumped ship, it will fundamentally mean that, you know, it does not address some of the issues that we face now, where it's not just individuals who are jumping, it is, you know, sometimes it is entire parties who are jumping over and betraying the mandate that they were elected on, right? But I think echoing what YB Kenming mentioned earlier, perhaps we can propose a higher threshold to triggering a recall election, and also maybe even limit the number of times a constituency can trigger it within a period of of that 5 years, right? So I think these are methods to make sure that there is not a continuous process of having these sort of recall elections, right? So I think for me, I believe that all political parties, especially those on the opposition, should take this up as a core part of their manifesto to make democracy meaningful again, right? Because it's clear that deterring party hopping is an important agenda for the Rakyat, regardless of whichever race or religion that you're in. And it's something that has hurt all major political parties. I think the only one who's benefited really is probably Parti Bersatu, right? But everyone else has been hurt by it. So I do think that this is a popular agenda. It should be pushed aggressively. The only important part is to explain to the public why they should be behind this and to make it into reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Tharma, and thank you, NGO friends and YBs, for sharing your thoughts and suggestions. We'd like to share that BERSIH has a virtual library. For more information, you can go and log on to bersih.org/virtual library. We will be sharing the link in the chat. On the library, you can find videos, papers, articles, and infographics on recall elections in Malaysia. And we will be also sharing a link to the media kit shortly after the event ends. We will now be opening the question and answer session till 11:30, and we welcome all questions you might have about this campaign and the e-voting system. You can either raise your hand or type your questions in the chat, and these questions will be answered by either Thomas Fan from BERSIH or a representative from ReGov. I'm going to first share some questions that we received on Facebook chat. The first question is directed to Julian Xiao or Simone. It's a question from Tan Wee Tiong. His question is this platform built on blockchain or is it centralized?
Yeah, so for this platform, it's currently not built on blockchain. We offer blockchain solutions, but at least for now, we aren't employing it.
Okay, thank you, Julian. Henry Casey Lim wants to know if the database that is used by voters, is that database listed in the constituency or for those, or is the database on those who have voted during the last general election? Is the database on voters who are listed in the constituency, or, yeah, so basically that's the question, I'm sorry. The data, whether it is from the database of the last general election or those who have.
Yeah, okay, I understand. Yeah, so the database, as currently specified by BERSIH, we are going to use the database from the electoral roll from GE14, so the previous election. So in the future, we might update, but currently the standard is to use it from the previous election, GE14, meaning anyone who registers or to become a voter after that, I believe anyone 1998 or later will not be able to participate.
Thank you, Julian. The next question from Facebook, which is also the final question from Facebook, is directed to Thomas. How do we prevent vicious cycles? For example, like what is happening in Taiwan? Today, MP A is sacked, then someone else says MP B should be elected. A supporter of MP A then decided to take revenge and launch a sack on B, and it goes on and on again. How do we address this?
Thank you. Yes, I think this would also address the concern raised by YB Ong Kian Ming regarding the threshold. But apart from, before I address the threshold, I also want to say that in our recommendation for a trigger to have a recall election, we limit it to three grounds. Number one, that there must be a defection from the party. That includes someone who leave the party and become independent, because they can remain independent, but their votes still go with another party or with the government. All right, so it covers those who go independent, and also people whose party defect. So that answers, I think, Tama's question, that our recommendation that it does cover those who switch their party switch coalition. Okay, so I think that's one limitation, party hopping, defections. Second grounds to trigger recall in our recommendation, not this mock recall, is when the elected person has been convicted of a compoundable offense, but jail for less than a year or fine less than 2,000. Because oftentimes we do see judges taking into consideration that these are elected representatives, give them a fine of less than 2,000. You know, but then it is up to the voters of his constituency or her constituency to decide whether they can accept the conviction, the offense committed. So they can then, on that ground, trigger or petition for a recall. You know, the third ground is when the person has been absent in a year more than 80% of the sitting days in the parliament or in the assembly, where this person has not attended parliament or the DUN, and then the voters can, on those grounds, trigger. All right. So with that kind of very clear, specific ground, the chance of, say, a political opponent, especially in a hotly contested seat where the winner won by just a few percentage points, the risk of having this vicious cycle of recall and counter recall would be totally minimized if they don't fulfill these three grounds that we are recommending. Okay. The other thing that to minimize, I want to talk about is also threshold. To control the abuse of this is that our recommendation, in the recommendation, not this mock recall, is that first of all, you need a 1% to, you collect a 1% signature, and then you forward it to the Election Commission, who will then verify these voters 1%, and then give you another target of 10% to collect signature. And once those are achieved within a period of 2 months, then the Election Commission will then conduct the recall election, where to have a successful recall, more than 50% of voters plus one, more than 50% has to say, yes, I want to sack this voter. Or if, let's say, this voter, this elected person won with 34% at the last election, in a multi-cornered contest, then it is more than the votes he collected the last time. So either one would then effect a successful recall. So these are just our recommendation from BERSIH. But if the government decided to, whoever the government decided to make this into law, there has to be a consultation where there is a fine-tuning of the grounds and also the threshold. So based on our consultation and research, those are our recommendations. But coming back to the simulated recall election that we are doing right now, we decided to change the threshold and limit the ground. The ground is only a constituency where they saw a defection from the party or their party defected to another coalition. All right, so we estimated that we're talking about parliamentary seats and don't seats at least 70 over eligible constituency around that. Maybe Chin Huat can give us the exact number, but that is the number of constituency that are eligible to take part in this mock recall election. Now, on the threshold, we decided to, instead of the 1% and the 10%, just 3%. The first stage, 3% registered voters, and then after that we go straight for a recall vote where at least 10% need to take part. Why we are doing lowering it is simply because we are not the election commission, and this is a mock recall, not an actual recall. And thirdly, this is a time of pandemic. It is not just only, though we are doing it online, but for a mock recall to be successful, the petitioner, need to basically campaign for the recall, for the yes vote. They need to, in normal time, if there's no pandemic, I can foresee that, say, Gomba or Tabrau, the party there, PKR, would go to shopping centers and put up banners. If you want to recall YB so-and-so, scan this QR code, which would then bring you to our recall campaign page, whereby they can then start the process of voting. I can see that happening if you want to do a campaign for this 1 month recall period during the mock recall. But because of the pandemic, all of us are limited. So we adjusted the threshold to 3 and then 10% participation so that people have a sense, a sample of what the recall election is like. So that's my explanation on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. We have a question from H.C. Wong from the Governance, Legislation, Policy Society in Penang.
Yes. First of all, I would like to congratulate BERSIH on the launching on the simulation of the election recall. But first of all, my question is, hasn't BERSIH, I mean, we are too focused on this, but haven't we checked on the constitutional impact on how this constitutional impact may, prevent such recall or those like anti-jump laws from being implemented? Because what I know is the constitutional impact means about regarding the freedom of association. Okay, because as long as the political parties and the political coalitions, as long as they are still under the jurisdiction of the registrar society, the registration, the submission annual report, and the control and the process, everything is still under the registrar societies. Okay, so that means the constitutional impact is still there. That will prevent such anti-hopping law or recall elections from taking place. Why? Because the definition of the constitution is registration of association, freedom of associations. Okay, so to take this impact out, our opinion is political societies and political coalitions registrations must first be taken off from the control or jurisdictions from the registrar of societies first, and put this all under the control of the election commission. Let them supervise, control, and register, and they are the one who determine the position of the political party or the political coalition. Okay, we have to take off political parties and political coalitions from the jurisdiction of being marked as a association or society, so that it will not be an impact saying that it prevents freedom of association. Because why? To amend the federal constitution now is I feel that is very impossible already, based on based on the fact that we will not see political coalitions or any political parties having absolute majority in the near future. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thomas, would you like to take that?
Well, I think for this question, I want to invite Professor Wong Chin Huat to just respond to this.
Thank you, Thomas. Thanks for the questions from Mr. Wong. Let me first put it very clearly that anti-hopping law and recall elections law are different animals. Anti-hopping law is compulsory vacating the seats of anyone who jumped. So therefore, it certainly cannot go beyond, cannot free itself from the constraint of the 1992 verdict by the Supreme Court then, that outlaws all anti-hopping law. Recall elections, however, is wider. It's a question of to disqualify and vacate the seats based on the conduct of the elected representative. And whether or not that the first ground that we put forward, change of party affiliations, that is something arguable in court. We are seeking the service of a prominent senior lawyer to formulate a legal view on this. And even in my very shallow understanding, it has nothing to do whether the political parties or coalitions have to come under the control of the Election Commission. It's two different matters. And on other ground, for example, what we suggest on absence, 80% of absence in 80% of sitting days for a consecutive periods of 6 months, or getting convicted for any non-compoundable offenses. I do not see in any way they will be restricted. So that's my first point. The second point, the reason why we are having the mock elections is for Malaysians to understand how this works. And so that if they demand such changes, then they would encourage ultimately a change at the federal level, and also to encourage state level to amend their state constitutions, because that's what first and foremost they need to do. Whether or not the federal try to stop it is a second political matter that the state might have to consider. So I hope this helped to clear the doubts that why recall elections is a reasonable and a viable option that the Malaysian public should pursue, and encourage federal lawmakers, federal government, and state lawmakers, state governments, to make necessary changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wong Chin Huat. Can we now have questions from the media? Does the media have any questions? No questions from the media. We have one question from that is directed to reGov. reGov, what kind of user data is stored and how do you do so?
Okay, thank you, Debbie. Let me take that question. So first of all, we are not storing any data unless we have consent from the voter. So what is actually happening, if you vote and you're not opting in for the updates, we store nothing. Everything gets deleted after your vote has been registered. The only thing we retain is a fingerprint, a digital fingerprint of your IC number to make sure that you cannot vote again. Okay. In case you shall opt in for the updates, of course, we have to retain your email address and your name to be able to address you. But even in that case, that is not correlated back to your IC number or anything else that you submitted during the process, so that you can rest assured your support for a 3% petition or your vote in a 10% petition is private. While having the mic, I also like to complement the answer Julian earlier get, why didn't we use blockchain? The main reason for that is to get the benefits of increased integrity and privacy that would come from a blockchain-based solution. We would need to have multiple parties that would be hosting the nodes. At the moment, it's only BERSIH for the first simulation. It's on our technical roadmap to activate the blockchain in the background once we have a sufficient number of parties involved that would like to collaborate and support that effort and host nodes, so that we can technically make sure privacy and integrity is secured.
Thank you very much, Simon. We would like to thank everyone who has joined us for the launch today. Special thanks to Tan Sri Arif Yusof for officiating this event. For more information on recall elections, you can log on to bersih.org/virtual-library. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at BERSIH.
There is still a hand raised.
Oh, there is? Let me see.
Danish.
Danish. Okay, we can take a question from Danish.
Good morning, everyone. So I would like to first congratulate BERSIH for this initiative. I fully endorse this mock recall elections and I have no problems with the procedure. I think for me, this is a challenge for all of us, is to work towards an unrestricted form. And this question is more directed to not to BERSIH per se, it's actually to our YBs. Are you ready to implement an unrestricted version for recall where we can assess the performance of our YBs, and if they underperform, we can recall? Because right now, I call it a restricted version. I understand why, but it's not something I'm in favor of.
Thank you, Danish. So thank you, Chin Huat, would you like to, Dr. Wong Chin Huat, I'm so sorry.
Yes, I would like to respond to Danish. I think it's important for people to understand why we restrict the ground. Most recall elections in the world do not have restriction. But if you look at the UK version, it does restrict it to the ground as a way to discipline elected representative. Why do we adopt the British model on this particular aspect and use other models, use others variants? The reason being that we have seen in some American states, I think is Wisconsin and also in Taiwan, where recall elections can be abused by parties to either revert a very marginal election outcome or as a form of retaliations. It's not abused everywhere, but given the toxic political environment in Malaysia, that's likely going to be abused. So we think that it's most important to get this through. And as a threshold, we are putting, as Thomas has explained, what I want to add on another point very briefly is between anti-hopping law and recall elections. A lot of people think that we should go for the straightforward method on anti-hopping law, and recall election is too complicated. The main difference is this: while both would have the impact of vacating the seats and force any elected representative who have changed their party or coalition affiliations to face a by-elections, in anti-hopping law, the power is vested with party leaders. However, in recall election, it is with the voters, and the voters can take away also part of the power given to the speaker now when they simply give leave to elected representatives who are absent for more than 6 months, or to give to judges who can avoid imposing a disqualifying sentence of imprisonment up to a year or a fine up to 2,000. So we basically take away all this power and give back to the voters. So you can see that in both ways. One is to further increase the circumstances that elected representative may be punished beyond the current law. Second, to make sure all these additional circumstances, the power lies with the voters and not party leaders, judges, or speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wang Xunhuat. This launch is the start of a campaign where simulated recall elections will be carried out in constituents that would like their voices and choices heard in the coming weeks and months. So please tune in to BERSIH 2.0's official social media to find out more during the next weeks and months. We'd like to thank everyone for attending today, and we wish you stay safe and take care. Thank you.
Recording stopped.
Thank you everyone for attending this launch. Okay, and so now the campaign is open. So if you have people in those constituency that has defection, they can contact us, and we will then look into starting a campaign for them. Thank you.